In June 2023, a decorated United States intelligence officer sat before Congress and testified under oath. He wasn't a conspiracy theorist. He wasn't some anonymous source. He was a man with top-tier security clearances, a stellar military record, and his name attached to every single word. He said the U.S. government possesses non-human craft. He said the physics of their propulsion completely violates known conservation laws. Oh, and he said there is biological material. And then, completely separately, a Stanford immunologist published peer-reviewed research showing that people who encounter these craft come back with measurably expanded neural connectivity in very specific regions of the brain. Nobody's connecting what those two things mean together. Until now. Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving into a genuinely mind-bending question. What if the latest Pentagon UAP disclosures and cutting-edge Stanford neuroscience are actually pointing to the exact same fundamental revision of reality?
Okay, so we need to start by anchoring ourselves in undeniable facts. Back in July 2023, David Grush sat before the House Oversight Committee. He testified about the existence of legacy crash retrieval and reverse engineering programs that have been operating completely without legally mandated congressional oversight. Under oath, he stated that the government and its aerospace contractors are holding intact and partially intact vehicles of non-human origin. And we're talking about recoveries dating all the way back to a Bell-like craft in Italy in 1933. And, crucially, alongside these physical assets, non-human biologics were also recovered.
Now, it is absolutely critical to understand exactly who is making these claims. David Charles Grush isn't just some guy. He was an intelligence officer for 14 years, operating at the GS-15 civilian level. To put that into perspective, that's the military equivalent of a full bird colonel. He was cleared to literally all special access programs and controlled access programs. He served as the National Reconnaissance Officer representative to the UAP task force, and he actually co-led UAP and transmedium object analysis for the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. He interviewed over 40 high-level witnesses with direct, hands-on knowledge of these programs before he ever filed a formal whistleblower complaint. He is, by definition, the ultimate vetted insider.
So what exactly are these highly classified programs analyzing? Let's look at the physical anomalies documented by the Pentagon itself. The All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO, right alongside private sector groups, has cataloged 5 distinct kinematic behaviors. They call them the UAP observables. We're talking about instantaneous acceleration. I mean, going from totally stationary to hypersonic speeds in milliseconds. That implies hundreds of G-forces that would literally crush any known human aircraft into tinfoil. We're talking hypersonic velocity without sonic booms or thermal friction. Transmedium travel, meaning they seamlessly move from space into the atmosphere and down into the ocean. And an apparent total violation of inertia, executing these sharp right-angle turns at extreme velocities without even slowing down. These maneuvers don't just bend our classical conservation laws of energy and momentum, they completely shatter them.
Right, so how do we even begin to explain this without totally breaking physics? Well, we have to bring in physicist Puthoff's framework of metric engineering. According to Puthoff, advanced technology could create a localized bubble that alters the vacuum energy density right around the craft. Think of it less like an engine pushing a car down a road and more like a surfer creating their own wave. By reducing the resistance of space itself, the vehicle essentially distorts space-time. It contracts space in front of it and expands space behind it. It's basically a real-world applied version of the Alcubierre warp drive metric.
Notice the really crucial difference here between our primitive thrust models and the elegant physics of metric engineering. Classical propulsion works by pushing mass through rigid space. You burn fuel, you create thrust, you hit aerodynamic drag, and you need an infinite amount of energy to ever reach the speed of light. Metric engineering doesn't move the craft through space at all. It moves space around the craft. Because the interior of this warp bubble remains perfectly flat, the craft and whoever is inside it feel absolutely zero acceleration. They suffer no time dilation, and they bypass the mechanical constraints of mass and inertia entirely. It's brilliant.
Okay, now we pivot sharply to a biological plot twist that changes absolutely everything. Enter Dr. Garry Nolan. He's a highly respected, tenured professor of pathology and immunology at the Stanford University School of Medicine. We're talking over 300 published research articles in top-tier journals like Nature and Cell, 40 U.S. patents, and he's founded 8 biotech companies. And get this, intelligence officers actually approached him. They asked him to examine the clinical neurobiology of military personnel, fighter pilots, and intelligence officers who had come into close proximity with suspected UAPs. Initially, the investigators naturally assumed these patients might have suffered some sort of localized brain trauma.
maybe from anomalous propulsion fields or directed energy, right? But when Nolan actually looked at their MRI scans, he didn't find damage. He found an anomaly. In a very specific region of the brain, these highly functioning UAP experiencers possessed 5 to 15 times the normal neural connectivity density. Let that sink in for a second. Up to 15 times the normal structural density. That is massive.
So the really crucial point here is that this hyperconnectivity wasn't an injury caused by the craft. Nolan found that it was located in the tract connecting the head of the caudate nucleus and the putamen, deep within the basal ganglia. Now, this is a region responsible for rapid parallel processing, goal-directed behavior, and complex multisensory integration. Nolan actually calls it the brain within the brain. And here is the detail that shifts the entire paradigm. By tracking down historical MRIs for some of these patients, Nolan proved they had this dense neural architecture before their encounters. It's congenital. It's highly heritable. It essentially acts as a kind of high-bandwidth antenna, allowing these individuals to synthesize high-dimensional data that the rest of us simply do not have the hardware to process.
Let's build the theoretical bridge that connects the physics of these craft to the biology of these specific observers. In contemporary physics, there's this growing, undeniable consensus that space-time is actually not fundamental. Cognitive scientist Donald Hoffman has developed mathematical theories demonstrating that physical particles are actually projections of a deeper network of communicating conscious agents. According to his rigorous math, space-time is essentially just a perceptual interface. It's like a 3D computer desktop, and the physical objects we see, they're just the icons on that screen.
And you know, this aligns perfectly with computer scientist Bernardo Kastrup's framework of analytic idealism. Kastrup argues that consciousness itself is the absolute foundation of reality. Physical matter doesn't create the mind. Actually, scratch that, it's the other way around. The physical world is just what the mind looks like from the outside. In this view, the human brain acts as a sort of reducing valve. It filters out the vast, overwhelming dynamics of universal consciousness just so we can focus on basic physical survival. But remember those UAP experiencers? That 5 to 15 times neural density in their caudate putamen? That represents a literal biological modification of that reducing valve.
When we put the classical, physicalist approach right next to this consciousness-first approach, the classical model just completely fails us. It stubbornly tries to calculate mechanical thrust and drag for UAPs, leaving all their impossible maneuvers completely unresolved. It assumes UAP experiencers just have brain damage. It assumes space-time is a rigid, fundamental container. But the consciousness-first approach? It elegantly solves the whole mystery. It treats UAP kinematics as localized metric engineering, literally altering the interface coordinates themselves. It correctly identifies the biology as a heritable, high-bandwidth sensory receiver, and it perfectly aligns with cutting-edge physics that views space-time as an emergent data structure rather than a fundamental reality.
So when we put this all together, the conclusion is absolutely staggering. UAPs are not just metal, nuts and bolts ships pushing through a physical grid. If space-time is a perceptual interface, then instantaneous acceleration, the total absence of thrust, and the violation of inertia aren't breaking physical laws at all. They are hacking the source code of reality. These crafts are directly manipulating the rendering rules of our sensory desktop, effectively altering the metric of space-time. And the people who are best equipped to perceive and interact with this phenomena are simply the ones who possess the biological hardware, that expanded neural bandwidth, to process that high-dimensional data.
Which leaves us with this final, massive question to close out the explainer. We have official Pentagon documentation of craft manipulating the space-time metric. We have peer-reviewed Stanford immunology proving observers possess expanded neural bandwidth. We have mathematicians mathematically proving space-time is an interface of conscious agents. So, what if the non-human craft and the consciousness research are both detecting the exact same new physics? And what if the answer to both implies that consciousness, not matter, is the true foundational fabric of our universe? It is a paradigm-destroying thought. Keep asking questions, keep questioning the data, and thanks so much for joining us for this explainer.